Commander Darius Jackson stepped off the transport shuttle and breathed in the familiar air of Earth for the first time in 15 years. The spaceport in New Atlanta had changed since he left. Bigger, shinier, filled with more aliens and off-world technology. But underneath all that newness, there was still something that felt like home. Darius adjusted his civilian clothes, feeling strange without his Galactic Fleet uniform. The black jacket and simple pants felt too loose, too ordinary compared to the fitted uniform he wore almost every day on the battleship Nova Dawn. He grabbed his small travel bag and moved through the arrival gate, his military posture and confident walk making a few heads turn despite his plain clothes. He had come back for one reason only, to say goodbye to his mother. The message had reached him 3 weeks ago while his ship was patrolling the outer colonies. By the time he arranged emergency leave and secured transport back to Earth, the funeral had already happened. Still, he needed to visit her grave, to say the words he never got to say while she was alive. A taxi took him to his childhood neighborhood, now changed almost beyond recognition. Where there had once been modest homes and small businesses, there now stood tall apartment buildings and glossy storefronts. The driver, an older man with graying hair, kept glancing at Darius in the rearview mirror. "First time in New Atlanta?" the driver asked. "No," Darius replied. "I grew up here, just been gone a while." "Military?" the driver asked, obviously noting Darius's straight posture and short haircut. Darius nodded. "Galactic Fleet," the driver whistled. "Not many from these parts make it there. Folks around here mostly stay grounded." There was something like respect in his voice. Darius was dropped off at a small hotel where he had booked a room for the week. After checking in, he decided to walk to the cemetery, which was only 20 minutes away. The afternoon sun beat down on the city, warming the concrete and glass. Despite the changes to the buildings and streets, Darius found he still knew the way by heart. As he walked, he noticed how differently some people looked at him. On his ship and in the colonies, his uniform earned him automatic respect. Here, in civilian clothes, some people crossed the street when they saw him approaching or clutched their bags tighter. 15 years among the stars made him almost forget how it felt to be judged based solely on his appearance. At the corner of Mason Street and 8th Avenue, Darius stopped at a crossing light. The cemetery was just 2 blocks away. As he waited, he noticed a small food shop across the street with a sign reading, "Tina's Bakery." His mother used to take him there for cookies when he was a child. Something inside him lightened at seeing the small business had survived amid all the changes. The light turned green, and Darius started across. Halfway over, a sleek silver car sped through the intersection, barely missing him and several other pedestrians. The car swerved wildly before hitting a parked vehicle with a loud crash. Without thinking, Darius ran toward the accident. His training kicked in immediately. Assess the situation, check for injuries, secure the area. The driver of the silver car, a young man with a bloody nose, stumbled out looking dazed. An older woman sat in the passenger seat holding her arm and crying out in pain. "Don't move her," Darius told the young man firmly. "She might have neck injuries." He quickly checked the woman's pulse and pupils, then pulled out his personal communicator to call emergency services. Within minutes, police and medical response teams arrived. Darius stepped back to let them work, giving a brief statement about what he had witnessed. As the paramedics were loading the injured woman into an ambulance, one of the police officers approached Darius. "You a doctor?" the officer asked, a man named Benson according to his badge. "No, sir. Military medical training." Officer Benson nodded, then looked more closely at Darius. "ID, please." Darius reached for his wallet and handed over his civilian identification card, keeping his military credentials separate for now. Officer Benson examined the card with narrowed eyes, then looked back at Darius. "This says you've been off planet for over a decade. What brought you back?" "Family matters," Darius said simply, not wanting to discuss his mother's death with a stranger. Another police officer joined them, whispering something to Benson. Darius caught a few words, matches description, and reported in the area. Benson's demeanor changed instantly. "Sir, please put your hands where I can see them." Darius blinked in surprise but complied immediately. Is there a problem, officer? There was a report of suspicious activity in this area earlier today. Person matching your description. I just arrived on Earth today, Darius explained calmly. I came straight from the spaceport to my hotel, then was walking to the cemetery to visit my mother's grave. Officer Benson seemed unmoved. We'll need to take you in for questioning. The driver of the vehicle claims you jumped in front of his car. Darius stared in disbelief. The light was green for pedestrians. There are witnesses. The driver's father is Deputy Mayor Lewis, the second officer cut in, and he says his son is very shaken up about almost hitting you. Despite his confusion and growing frustration, Darius remained composed. His years as a commander had taught him that losing his temper never improved a situation. I understand. I'll cooperate fully. As the officers led him to their patrol car, Darius noticed several bystanders watching. Some looked concerned, others simply turned away. A few had their phones out recording the scene. He could have shown his galactic fleet identification, pulled rank, or called for legal assistance that would have him released immediately. As Special Operations Commander and newly appointed Interstellar Judiciary Oversight Commissioner, he had authority that far exceeded that of local law enforcement. But something made him hold back. Perhaps it was curiosity about how the justice system worked in his hometown after all these years away. Perhaps it was his actual assignment to evaluate planetary justice systems for the Galactic Alliance. Or perhaps it was simply that he wanted to be treated like any other citizen would be in this situation. At the police station, his civilian ID was taken, and he was told he would appear before a judge the next morning. They placed him in a holding cell with two other men, both of whom eyed him warily before returning to their own thoughts. Darius sat on the bench, closed his eyes, and thought of the stars. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Darius spent an uncomfortable night in the holding cell. The hard bench and constant noise made real sleep impossible. Still, he had endured far worse conditions during his 15 years in the Galactic Fleet. When morning came, he was given a small breakfast and told to prepare for his court appearance. Judge Winters is on the bench today, a police officer said as he led Darius to a small room where other detainees waited. Better be on your best behavior. Darius nodded politely but said nothing. He had spent the night observing the police station, noting how different people were treated. Some detainees were spoken to harshly, while others received friendly chats and coffee. It was information he stored away, part of his evaluation of Earth's justice system. The waiting room was crowded with about 20 people. Most avoided eye contact, staring at the floor or walls. A woman in the corner was crying softly. An older man in worn clothes kept mumbling to himself. Darius took a seat and waited patiently. After 2 hours, Darius's name was called. To court, officers led him into the courtroom. It was smaller than he expected, with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of old papers. Judge Harold Winters sat on a raised platform at the front, looking down at everyone else. He was a thin man with gray hair and cold eyes behind small glasses. Case number 47293, called out the court clerk. Darius Jackson, charged with causing a public disturbance and interfering with traffic. Judge Winters looked up from his papers and stared at Darius. His expression changed slightly, his mouth tightening. Approach the bench, Mr. Jackson. Darius walked forward and stood before the judge with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back in a natural military stance. That's not how we stand in my courtroom, Judge Winters said with a frown. Put your hands at your sides. Darius complied without comment. Says here you're from off-world, the judge continued, looking at the papers before him. One of those space travelers who thinks Earth rules don't apply anymore? No, Your Honor, Darius replied calmly. I'm well aware of Earth's laws and follow them respectfully. The judge raised an eyebrow. Listen to that fancy talk, he said loudly enough for the whole courtroom to hear. I bet they teach you to talk like that up in space, huh? Think it makes you sound smart? Darius remained silent, recognizing the provocation for what it was. Well, the judge pressed. Nothing to say now? I was responding to your question, Your Honor, Darius said. I didn't hear a new one. A few people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor, a woman with short blonde hair and a navy blue suit, glanced up from her files with a slight frown. "Let's get on with it," Judge Winters said. "You're charged with causing a disturbance and interfering with traffic. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Darius replied. "I was legally crossing at a pedestrian crossing with the walk signal when a vehicle ran a red light. After the vehicle crashed, I provided assistance to the injured parties until emergency services arrived." The judge leaned forward. "That's not what Deputy Mayor Lewis's son says happened. He says you jumped out in front of his car, causing him to swerve and crash. With respect, Your Honor, there were multiple witnesses. I don't need your excuses," Judge Winters cut him off. "We have the statement from a respected member of this community. Who are you? Just some man who's been away from Earth so long he's forgotten how things work here." The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, we do have conflicting witness statements in this case, and Mr. Jackson has no prior record." The judge waved his hand dismissively. "Ms. Miller, I've heard enough. This case is straightforward." Darius spoke, clearly. "Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence in my defense." "Evidence?" Judge Winters repeated mockingly. "What evidence could you possibly have? You just got back to Earth yesterday, according to your statement." "There were traffic cameras at the intersection," Darius explained calmly, "and several bystanders recorded the incident on their personal devices. These recordings would show that I was legally crossing with the signal when the vehicle ran the red light." Judge Winters' face darkened. "Are you suggesting that Mr. Lewis is lying about what happened?" "I'm suggesting that objective evidence would clarify exactly what occurred," Darius replied. A court officer standing near the wall, whose name tag read Martinez, watched the exchange with growing interest. He tapped something into his tablet discreetly. "You come into my courtroom and question the testimony of the deputy mayor's son?" Judge Winters' voice rose. "Maybe things work differently where you've been, but here on Earth we respect authority." "I have great respect for proper authority, Your Honor," Darius said. "I've dedicated my life to upholding justice across human settlements." The judge leaned forward, his face reddening. "Don't get uppity with me, boy. You think because you've been flying around space that you're better than the rest of us? Better than me?" The courtroom fell completely silent. The prosecutor, Ms. Miller, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Officer Martinez had moved closer, still watching intently. "No, Your Honor," Darius answered calmly. "I believe all humans deserve equal treatment under the law regardless of their position or background." Judge Winters laughed harshly. "Equal treatment? Is that what they teach you up there? Let me teach you how things really work down here." He shuffled his papers dramatically. "Bail is set at $5,000. Next case." "Your Honor," the prosecutor interjected, "the standard bail for this type of minor offense is $500. "Did I ask for your opinion, Ms. Miller?" the judge snapped. $5,000, and I'm adding a charge of contempt of court for his attitude." Darius remained perfectly still, his face betraying no emotion despite the unfair treatment. He had seen far worse injustices on distant worlds, yet it saddened him to find it here, in his hometown. Officer Martinez stepped forward suddenly. "Your Honor, there's a matter regarding the defendant's property that needs to be addressed." Judge Winters glared at the interruption. "What is it, officer?" "Sir, when processing Mr. Jackson's belongings, we found something that I believe should be brought to the court's attention immediately." The judge sighed dramatically. "Fine. What is it?" Officer Martinez approached Darius and handed him a small black case. "I believe this belongs to you, sir." Darius looked at the case in his hand, recognizing his official credentials. He glanced at Officer Martinez, who gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. The courtroom waited in curious silence for what would happen next. Darius held the small black case in his hands, feeling its familiar weight. The courtroom had gone quiet. All eyes were on him, including those of Judge Winters, whose expression had shifted from arrogance to curiosity. "Well?" the judge demanded. "What is it that's so important it interrupts my courtroom?" Darius looked at Officer Martinez, who gave him another slight nod. Then he looked back at Judge Winters. For a moment, He considered putting the case away and continuing to experience the justice system as an ordinary citizen would. But the judge's treatment of him and others in the courtroom had convinced him that it was time to reveal his true purpose. With deliberate slowness, Darius opened the case. Inside was a gleaming silver badge with the emblem of the Galactic Fleet Special Operations Division. Below it was an identification card with his photo, rank, and a special seal that glowed with a soft blue light, the mark of the Interstellar Judiciary Oversight Commission. He held it up so the judge could clearly see it. Your Honor, I am Commander Darius Jackson of the Galactic Fleet Special Operations Division. I also serve as the newly appointed Interstellar Judiciary Oversight Commissioner for Earth's integration into the Galactic Alliance. The judge's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The prosecutor, Ms. Miller, stood up quickly. Your Honor, may I approach the bench? Judge Winters nodded weakly, still staring at the badge in Darius's hand. Ms. Miller hurried forward, and Officer Martinez joined them. They spoke in hushed tones, but Darius could hear their conversation clearly, thanks to his enhanced military hearing. Is this legitimate? Ms. Miller whispered urgently. Officer Martinez nodded. I verified it myself. He's not just any fleet officer. He's one of the highest-ranking commanders in the Special Operations Division. And that other credential, it's the new oversight position created after Earth joined the Alliance last year. The one that evaluates planetary justice systems? Ms. Miller asked, her voice tense. Yes, Martinez confirmed. They're supposed to conduct anonymous evaluations of courts across Earth to ensure compliance with Alliance standards. The judge finally found his voice, though it was much quieter than before. Why wasn't I informed of this inspection? That's the point of it being anonymous, sir, Martinez replied. To see how the courts function naturally. Judge Winters swallowed hard and turned back to Darius. Commander Jackson, he said, his tone completely transformed. Please accept the court's apologies for this misunderstanding. Of course, all charges against you are dismissed immediately. Darius stepped forward. Thank you, Your Honor, but I'm not here for special treatment. I'd like to address the court, if I may. The judge nodded quickly. Of course, Commander, the court recognizes Commander Darius Jackson. Darius turned to face the entire courtroom. The other defendants, the court staff, and even a few visitors who had come to watch the proceedings were all staring at him with wide eyes. I returned to Earth after 15 years serving in the Galactic Fleet, Darius began, his voice clear and steady. I came to visit my mother's grave and found myself unexpectedly experiencing our justice system firsthand. While I could have identified myself immediately, I chose not to because part of my mission as Judiciary Oversight Commissioner is to evaluate how Earth's courts treat all citizens, not just those with rank or privilege. He paused, looking directly at Judge Winters, who squirmed uncomfortably in his seat. The Galactic Alliance has standards for all member worlds, Darius continued. These standards include equal treatment under the law regardless of a person's appearance, background, or social status. Earth was granted probationary membership in the Alliance last year, with full membership dependent on meeting these standards. The prosecutor, Ms. Miller, had returned to her seat but was leaning forward, listening intently. When we look at developing worlds across the galaxy, Darius said, one of the first things we assess is their justice system. How a society treats its most vulnerable members tells us everything about its readiness to join the wider galactic community. He turned slightly to address the other defendants waiting for their cases to be heard. Each of you deserves the same fair treatment under the law that would be given to a deputy mayor's son or a fleet commander. That is the standard the Alliance expects. Turning back to the judge, Darius continued, Your Honor, my evaluation of this court will be included in my report to both Earth's Planetary Council and the Alliance Membership Committee. I will be fair and thorough in my assessment, just as I would hope this court would be with those who come before it. Judge Winters had begun to sweat visibly. Commander Jackson, I assure you that what you witnessed today was unusual, perhaps a bad day, not representative of how justice is typically administered in this court. Darius nodded. I understand, Your Honor. Everyone has difficult days. However, I've observed similar patterns in the holding cells and processing areas. Different standards seem to apply to different people based on factors that should be irrelevant to justice. Officer Martinez stepped forward again. Commander, if I may, there are many of us in the system who would welcome reforms. Some of us have been trying to make changes from within. I believe that, Darius said with a smile. Change often begins with individuals who recognize the need for it. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I request that you reconsider the cases you've heard this morning and ensure that all defendants receive fair treatment according to the law, not according to their status or appearance. Judge Winters cleared his throat nervously. Of course, Commander. In fact, why don't we start fresh with today's docket? He banged his gavel. Court will take a 15-minute recess, after which we will recall all cases heard this morning. As the judge hurried from the bench, whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. The prosecutor approached Darius. Commander Jackson, Ms. Miller, said quietly, I want you to know that some of us have been documenting Judge Winters' behavior for months. We've been trying to build a case, but his connections have made it difficult. Darius nodded. Perhaps those connections will matter less with alliance standards in play. I'd be interested in seeing your documentation, Ms. Miller. Officer Martinez joined them. Commander, the deputy mayor is on his way. Word travels fast. Good, Darius replied. I look forward to meeting him. He glanced around the courtroom where the other defendants were watching him with expressions ranging from confusion to hope. But first, I'd like to make sure everyone here gets the fair hearing they deserve. He knew this was just the beginning. One courtroom in one city was a small start, but it was a start nonetheless. The path to change was often slow, but as his mother had always told him, it began with standing up for what was right, even when, especially when, it was difficult. And after 15 years among the stars, Darius Jackson had come home to do exactly that. The 15-minute recess stretched to 30 as Judge Winters stayed in his chambers. When he finally returned to the courtroom, his red face and tight collar suggested a difficult phone conversation. Behind him came a tall man in an expensive suit, Deputy Mayor Lewis himself. The deputy mayor's eyes locked onto Darius immediately. Court is back in session, Judge Winters announced, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. As stated, we will be reviewing all cases heard this morning. He glanced nervously at Darius, then at the deputy mayor who had taken a seat in the front row. Officer Martinez leaned close to Darius. The judge called the mayor's office. Word is spreading fast about who you are. Darius nodded, but said nothing. He remained standing near the prosecutor's table at Ms. Miller's invitation. The first 3 cases were quickly dismissed for lack of evidence. In each, the judge spoke kindly to the defendants, explaining their rights carefully. The transformation in his behavior was so dramatic that one elderly defendant asked if the judge was feeling well. When they reached the 4th case, a young woman charged with loitering, the deputy mayor stood up. Your Honor, I need to speak, with Commander Jackson immediately on urgent city business. Judge Winters looked uncertain. We're in the middle of court proceedings, Deputy Mayor. This concerns planetary security, the deputy mayor insisted. Darius turned to face him. Deputy Mayor Lewis, I assume. I'm happy to speak with you after court concludes. This can't wait, Lewis said, trying to sound authoritative despite the sweat on his brow. I believe it can, Darius replied calmly. As you can see, we're in the middle of ensuring that justice is properly served to all citizens equally. Surely that aligns with your city's values. The deputy mayor's face darkened. You have no authority to interfere with our local courts. Your commission is authorized directly by both Earth's Planetary Council and the Galactic Alliance, Darius finished for him. My report will go to both. Now, if you'd like to discuss this further, I suggest we let the court finish its business. First, your presence here is valuable. You can see firsthand how justice is administered to all your citizens. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Even the court officers were watching with undisguised interest. The deputy mayor stood frozen for a moment, then slowly sat back down. The rest of the morning proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Judge Winters handled each case with careful attention to proper procedure. Bail amounts were reasonable, explanations were clear, and not once did the judge make a comment about a defendant's appearance or background. When the last case was called, a young man named Kevin who had been caught with a small amount of recreational substances, the deputy mayor tensed visibly. It was his son. Kevin Lewis looked nothing like he had in the police report. Gone was the arrogant young man who had claimed Darius jumped in front of his car. Now he appeared nervous, his designer clothes wrinkled from a night in the holding cell. "Kevin Lewis," Judge Winters began, "you are charged with reckless driving, possession of illegal substances, and filing a false police report." The deputy mayor shot to his feet. "Your Honor, we had an understanding about my son's case." "Deputy Mayor," Judge Winters said, his voice strained, "please be seated or I will have you removed from my courtroom." Darius watched the exchange with interest. The judge was clearly torn between his old loyalties and the new reality of Alliance oversight. "Kevin Lewis," the judge continued after the deputy mayor reluctantly sat down, "how do you plead to these charges?" The young man looked at his father, then at Darius, then down at his shoes. "Guilty, Your Honor," he said quietly. His father stood up again. "Kevin, what are you doing? We discussed this." Judge Winters banged his gavel. "Deputy Mayor Lewis, this is your final warning. Another outburst and you will be held in contempt." Kevin looked at his father. "Dad, stop. The traffic cameras show what happened. I ran the red light, I nearly hit him." He nodded toward Darius. "And then I lied about it because you always said we could handle things." The courtroom was silent again. The deputy mayor slowly sank back into his seat, his face ashen. Judge Winters took a deep breath. "Given your guilty plea and the circumstances, Mr. Lewis, I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation, mandatory substance counseling, 40 hours of community service, and you'll pay for damages to the vehicle you struck. Your license will be suspended for 3 months." He looked at Kevin directly. "This is a light sentence considering the charges. I expect you to take it seriously." Kevin nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." When court finally adjourned for lunch, Darius found himself surrounded by people wanting to speak with him. Ms. Miller had questions about Alliance legal standards. Officer Martinez wanted to discuss police procedure reforms. Several defendants simply wanted to thank him. Deputy Mayor Lewis waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. His son stood slightly behind him, looking uncomfortable. "Commander Jackson," the deputy mayor said stiffly, "I hope you understand that what you saw today was not representative of our justice system." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The morning session where a judge showed clear bias based on appearance and social standing? Or the afternoon session where proper procedure was followed after my identity was known? Because only one of those reflects the standards of a society ready for full Alliance membership." Kevin stepped forward suddenly. "I'm sorry about what happened yesterday, and for lying about it." Darius looked at the young man with softer eyes. "Thank you for telling the truth today. That took courage, especially with your father watching." The deputy mayor's face reddened. "Commander, I want to assure you that we take Alliance membership very seriously. Perhaps we could discuss this privately in my office. I'm sure we can come to an understanding about your report." "My report will reflect exactly what I observed," Darius replied. "However, it will also include recommendations rather than just criticisms. The Alliance doesn't expect perfection, Deputy Mayor. It expects progress and a willingness to improve." "And if we demonstrate that willingness," the Deputy Mayor asked, "then my recommendation will be for continued probationary status with a path to full membership," Darius said. "I'll be evaluating courts across Earth over the next 6 months. Those that show the most improvement will be highlighted in my final report." Officer Martinez, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. "Commander, some of us have been working on reform proposals for months. Would you be willing to review them?" "I'd be happy to," Darius said. "That's exactly the kind of initiative the Alliance looks for." The deputy mayor seemed to realize he was losing control of the conversation. "Commander, I insist we continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting. My office is not where this work happens," Darius interrupted gently. "This work happens in courtrooms and holding cells and on the streets. It happens wherever citizens interact with their justice system. He looked around the now empty courtroom. I came home to say goodbye to my mother. She was a public defender in this very court for 30 years. She believed in justice for everyone, not just those with money or power. Her work will continue through mine. For the first time, the deputy mayor seemed at a loss for words. His son, however, stepped forward. "Commander," Kevin said quietly, "I'd like to do my community service working with Officer Martinez on those reforms if that's possible." Darius smiled. Perhaps there was hope after all. 6 months had passed since that day in Judge Winters's courtroom. Darius stood at the large window in his temporary office, looking out at the new Atlanta skyline. The city looked different now, or perhaps he was the one who had changed. His time back on Earth had taught him much about his home planet, both its flaws and its potential. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Officer Martinez, now Chief Martinez, entered carrying a tablet. He looked different, too. The new uniform of the reorganized police force suited him, and the confidence he carried came from leading real change rather than just dreaming about it. "The final numbers are in," Martinez said, holding up the tablet. "Complaints against officers down 60%. Court case processing times reduced by half. Public approval rating of the justice system up by 40 points. Darius nodded, taking the tablet to review the details. "And Judge Winters?" "Retired last month," Martinez said with a small smile. After the ethics review, he decided to spend more time with his family. Judge Miller is doing well in his place. Darius smiled at that. Susan Miller had been appointed to the bench after showing remarkable courage during the reform process. She had revealed years of documentation about judicial misconduct and had helped draft the new standards now being implemented across the region. "And our young friend?" Darius asked. "Kevin? He's still working with the youth outreach program he started during his community service. He's applying to law school now, wants to become a public defender like your mother was." That made Darius's smile widen. He had visited his mother's grave many times during his stay, telling her about the changes happening in the system she had fought to improve for decades. "The Planetary Council representatives will be here in an hour," Martinez reminded him. "Are you ready for your final presentation?" Darius nodded and set down the tablet. "As ready as I'll ever be. 6 months, 28 cities, over 100 courtrooms evaluated. It's been an education. For all of us," Martinez agreed. "When you first showed that badge in court, I never imagined we'd come this far so quickly." Darius moved to his desk and picked up the small black case that had started it all. Sometimes people just need a push to become their better selves. Fear of the Alliance's disapproval gave us leverage, but the desire for change was already here, in people like you and Susan Miller. Martinez looked down for a moment. "And Deputy Mayor Lewis? Will he be at the presentation?" "Former Deputy Mayor Lewis," Darius corrected. "Yes, he'll be there. His work with the Civilian Oversight Committee has been surprisingly effective. After the courtroom incident, Lewis had faced a choice: fight the reforms and lose his position, or embrace them and help lead the change. To everyone's surprise, including his son's, he had chosen the latter. Perhaps it was political calculation, or perhaps seeing his son take responsibility had sparked something in him. Either way, his influence had helped overcome resistance from other officials. An hour later, Darius stood before the Planetary Council representatives in the City Hall's main chamber. The room was packed with people from across the justice system: judges, police officers, public defenders, and community members who had participated in the reform process. 6 months ago, Darius began, I came to Earth to say goodbye to my mother. I ended up witnessing both the problems and the promise of our justice system firsthand. He activated the large screen behind him, showing statistics from his evaluations across the planet. What I found was a system that often delivered 2 different kinds of justice, one for the privileged, another for everyone else. This failed to meet Alliance standards, which require equal treatment under the law for all citizens regardless of their background or appearance. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. They had hoped for a more flattering assessment. However, Darius continued, what I also found was a remarkable capacity for change. The screen showed the improvement trends over the past 6 months. When problems were identified and support for reform was provided, Earth's justice systems showed tremendous progress. In some regions, like New Atlanta, the transformation has been nothing short of remarkable. He saw Martinez and Miller exchange proud glances in the audience. My recommendation to the Alliance is that Earth remain on probationary status for 1 additional year, with continued oversight but also with increased support for reform efforts. The progress I've seen suggests that full membership is not only possible, but likely if current trends continue. The lead council representative, an older woman with silver hair, leaned forward. Commander Jackson, given the progress you've documented, why not recommend immediate full membership? Darius considered the question carefully. Because lasting change requires time to become firmly rooted. The improvements we've seen are impressive, but still new. Another year will allow them to become standard practice rather than special effort. The council members conferred briefly. Then the lead representative spoke again. We accept your recommendation, Commander, and we would like to offer you a permanent position as Earth's liaison to the Alliance, overseeing our continued progress. Darius hadn't expected this. He had assumed he would return to his ship and duties among the stars once his evaluation was complete. I'm honored, he said sincerely, but I would need to consider such an offer carefully. My duties in the fleet can be handled by others, a new voice said from the back of the room. Darius looked up in surprise. Admiral Chen, his commanding officer from the Nova Dawn, stood at the rear entrance. The Admiral was rarely seen on Earth, preferring to direct operations from orbit. Admiral, Darius said, snapping to attention automatically. I wasn't informed. You were coming. The Admiral walked forward, her uniform crisp despite Earth's gravity. At ease, Commander. I came to hear your report firsthand. She turned to address the Council. The Galactic Fleet fully supports Commander Jackson's continued assignment to Earth if he chooses to accept. His work here has been noted at the highest levels of the Alliance. Later, after the formal proceedings had concluded, Darius found himself back at his mother's grave. The cemetery was quiet in the evening light. He placed fresh flowers beside her headstone and sat on the small bench nearby. I came to say goodbye, he said softly. But it seems I might be staying longer than I planned. He looked up at the darkening sky where the first stars were becoming visible. You always said real change happens at home, before it can happen among the stars. As the evening deepened around him, Darius thought about the choice before him: return to the vast reaches of space or remain here, helping his home world grow into its potential. Both paths had merit. Both offered purpose. In the silence of the cemetery, with Earth beneath him and the stars above, Commander Darius Jackson made his decision.